be rescinded.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I come to the floor today to talk about an issue that I am deeply concerned about. And that is, while I appreciate the work that was certainly done by Congressman Ryan and Senator Murray on the recent budget agreement, there is a provision in this agreement, in my view, that makes it a deal breaker. And that provision is that there is $6 billion taken from our current military retirees over the next 10 years from their cost of living increases to pay for this budget agreement. I believe that we do not have to take from the backs of our men and women in uniform to pay for more spending. I believe that there are ways that we can find $6 billion in $1 trillion of spending, trillions and trillions that we will spend over the next decade, rather than taking it from the men and women in uniform who have sacrificed the most for our country. What troubles me most about this particular provision of this budget agreement is that our military retirees that are under the age of 62 were singled out. There is no group under this agreement that is cut, that their benefits are cut. In fact, there are some changes to the contributions that federal employees will have to make to their retirement, but those changes are only made prospectively to new hires. Our men and women in uniform were not grandfathered under this agreement. They're the ones, the only ones, that were singled out under the agreement to have their benefits cut now. What I find most appalling is a question that we asked and we pressed the Department of Defense for, and that is what happens to our disabled veterans. Because when, unfortunately, many of us have been to Walter Reed, we've seen the injuries that our men and women in uniform have sustained fighting on our behalf in Afghanistan. Some did multiple tours in Afghanistan and also served our country in Iraq. And when you have a disability that occurs in the line of duty, you are entitled to a disability retirement. And this agreement will also cut the cost of living increases for our disabled veterans, which I find appalling, particularly some of the horrific injuries that too many of our men and women in uniform have sustained defending our country and taking the bullets for all of us. Under this agreement, an E7, a sergeant first class who retires at age 40 could stand to lose $72,000 by the time he turns or she turns age 62. To put that in perspective, the average retirement for an E7 is roughly $25,000. And so in that period, this cut of 1% to their COLA could equate to $72,000. And think about the impact that has on our veterans and our men and women in uniform who have done so much for our country. And why are they being singled out in this agreement? The other issue that I want to raise is this notion that some have said we have to vote for this agreement or we're going to face another government shutdown. I think that's a false choice. We may be in a rush to get home to our families for the holiday, but the notion that we can't find $6 billion somewhere else on a bipartisan basis for our men and women in uniform, that's a false choice. We can keep this government open. We can address the budget issues, but we should not do so on the backs of our men and women in uniform that are singled out in this agreement. Right now, as this agreement stands on the floor of the Senate, the tree, so-called amendment tree, has been filled. That means that any amendments that either side would want to offer cannot be offered right now because the majority leader has filled every part of the amendment tree, not allowing individual members to offer amendments. Were I allowed to offer amendments, I have filed 2 amendments that would address this issue for our military and have found other pay-fors to address the issue. And those are just 2 ideas that I came up with. And I'm sure that if we committed in this body to working on this issue, that we could quickly find $6 billion that would not be taken from the backs of our men and women in uniform, would not be taken from the backs of our disabled veterans who have already suffered too much on behalf of our nation. I do not believe that this is too much to ask of us here. We are blessed to be in this country and blessed to enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy in this country because of our men and women in uniform and what they have done to defend our nation. And make no mistake, a military retirement is not like any other retirement. When you retire from the military, you understand that you can be called back. You can be called back at any time, and who's most likely to be called back? Our younger veterans. In fact, since 2001, thousands of our veterans who thought that they were going back into civilian life have been called back by our government to serve their nation again. They didn't get to say yes or no. They had agreed that they were going to do that even though that they thought that they would be retired. That's what distinguishes a military retirement from other retirements or an average civilian retirement. They earn this for defending our country. I believe we should fulfill our responsibility to them, that they should not be singled out. Of all the groups to single out, they should not be the group to single out, and particularly everything that they have done for our nation. So, Mr. President, here's what I ask. I would ask that we take a few moments in this body, that we come up with $6 billion some other way instead of taking it from the backs of our men and women in uniform. That why don't we have an amendment process that would allow us to address this issue, would allow us to fix this now? And to those who are saying, we'll fix this later, that is such a Washington answer. If you're serving our country right now in Afghanistan, what kind of comfort is that to you that we'll fix this down the line after we vote for this agreement? How about fixing this now? I ask my colleagues to fix this now on behalf of our military, the best in the world, those who have sacrificed the most for our country. And if this body is to pass this agreement, I would call on our commander-in-chief to veto this agreement. Bring us to the White House. Make the House, make the Senate sit together and resolve this issue. As the commander-in-chief of this country, don't accept the cuts to the military and have our military retirees singled out, particularly our disabled veterans, in this agreement. We can get this done. We can get this done before the holidays. Yes, we'll suffer some personal inconvenience, but think about that. That is nothing compared to what our veterans have done for us and continue to do for us every single day in this great country. So with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Ms. President.